Welcome to the Real Estate Guys radio program. I'm your host, Robert Helms. You know, we love all kinds of real estate investing, and we're spending a few weeks talking about what you might consider to be alternative investments. Today's a real estate investment that can make a ton of sense if you'll just open your mind as we talk agricultural real estate on the Real Estate Guys radio show.
If you love real estate and have always wanted to own your own business, listen up. The Real Estate Guys and their panel of experts want to teach you how to go full-time fast in the real estate syndication business. These next few years may go down in history as one of the best times ever to acquire investment real estate. There are deals everywhere if you know where to look and how to assemble the resources. The Secrets of Successful Syndication seminar will show you how to make big money doing big deals from a team of experts that have syndicated projects totaling more than $1 billion. Don't wait for someone to give you a raise or create a job for you. Attend the Secrets of Successful Syndication and learn how to build a team, raise capital, find deals, and make full-time money in 6 months or less. Go to realestateguysradio.com and click on events. All the big players use syndication as a way to diversify risk, optimize profits, and earn big money. You can too. Go to realestateguysradio.com and click on events.
Welcome to the Real Estate Guys radio program. I'm your host, Robert Helms. With me, as usual, it's our financial strategist and co-host, Russell Gray.
Hey, Robert.
We love real estate, that's for sure, and we have this kind of series going, spending some time talking about additional assets people are considering, especially now. Times have changed, the markets have changed, and people are a little more open, at the same time, a little more cautious. Last week, we talked about oil and gas as an investment. You see the oil prices going down, back up again this week. I think mostly due to our show. And now you're thinking, well, is there opportunity? Today we're going to talk about a sector of real estate that we consider alternative because it's not mainstream to folks who listen to shows like this. Most of our listeners invest in houses and apartments and, various types of retail and office and land and development perhaps, but not so much the original use of land, which was agriculture.
Well, I mean, that's such a good point. People talk all the time about alternative or non-traditional assets, and then they talk about things that people have been investing in for hundreds and thousands of years, and they consider modern investing being these paper assets and these derivatives of things that are real. They're not things that are real. They're just claims on things that are real. And we spend a lot of time talking about counterparty risk and how dangerous counterparty risk is. At least in real estate, you own the real estate and you are the counterparty if you're using debt. Now, if you're depending upon income, the person on the other end of the transaction, your tenant, is the counterparty. If they fail to perform, your income stream stops, but you don't lose control of the asset as long as you can make those payments. When you look at agriculture or energy, they're just produce that comes out of the ground that produces income. And so the income isn't human labor. Obviously, it takes human labor to convert these commodities into something and get it to market. But at the end of the day, it's still merely a product that is going to get sold, is going to generate dollars, and is going to find its way into your pocket. And the thing that's great about it is it's a little bit insulated from the labor markets. And in an environment with a global economic shutdown and millions, tens of millions of people just in the United States unemployed, perhaps temporarily, we'll see, something permanent, something real, something essential, probably pretty attractive.
Well, that's really the case. What we've been talking about last week and next week are real assets, and that's what real estate is. It's something that's tangible. It's real. You can touch it, feel it, see it. And agriculture, not only is it real estate, but it produces something of high value. And I'll tell you what, I wasn't much interested in farmland years ago. But if you've been listening to the Real Estate Guys for some time, you know that this has been on our palate for the last 5, 6, 7 years because of what we call the impending calorie crunch. And this is simply the fact that Russ always says, do the math, and the math will tell you what to do. Here's the math. Population is increasing. Everyone born needs calories. And yet the resources to produce calories generally across the globe are diminishing, or the costs are increasing. So we have more people vying for less food. It's just like the way cap rates work. When you have more dollars chasing specific income, then people bid up the price for the same amount of income, and that affects the cap rate, the return rate. It lowers the return rate. So today, we see lots of opportunity in agricultural space, all kinds of different crops and produce and everything from long-term to short-term to quick turnaround to much longer timelines, all that. And the big differentiation between that and real estate like we're used to thinking about it is just what the land does. The land bears fruit, if you will, and your tenants are trees. And so all kinds of things go out the window, like tenant-landlord law, like unlawful detainers. I mean, there's a lot of that stuff. And market analysis. This is something you've spoken to a bunch of times on this show, Russ. The fact that with agriculture, you don't have to get the geographic market as exactly right as you do when you're buying an apartment building.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you think about it, you're putting nature on your side, right? In good times and bad times, people breed. There's more people coming. That's been going on for most of recorded human history, and even before that, or none of us would be here.
And I'm going to guess it's going to continue.
It's going to continue. So more people, more mouths to feed. And as humans expand their footprint on the planet, they actually begin to take over a lot of the farmland. I mean, just look at the United States in just the last 200 years, how much farmland has been converted into residential space. So you have a combination of more mouths to feed and less land to grow food on. And so technology, in terms of getting more produce out of the same land, that's going to be important. Driving costs out, the same thing that drove labor offshore, drove a lot of agricultural production offshore. The United States was an agricultural powerhouse, still is. But a lot of agriculture has moved offshore because their cheap labor is an advantage, whereas when you're a landlord, it's not. And so there's some reasons why I think agriculture has gotten very hot or very interesting to a lot of investors right now in today's current environment, because it offers you an opportunity to diversify some of the risks that are present in the changing times we're in right now.
Now, the big challenge with agriculture, we'll be upfront about this before you tune out, is that you generally need to buy a whole bunch of land and spend millions of dollars to put in the kind of infrastructure necessary to really create profitable crops. That all is changing, however, and before we're done, we're going to talk about a different model that might interest the typical passive real estate investor, and we've got a great guest who you'll meet when we come back. You're tuned to the Real Estate Guys radio program. I'm your host, Robert Helms.
Need help with your real estate investment portfolio? Check out the resources page at realestateguysradio.com.
When the world changes, investing strategy changes too. The coronavirus is disrupting economies, financial systems, and daily life like nothing in modern history. Sheltering in place might protect you from the virus, but a wait-and-see approach to investing now is like pulling the sheets over your head while the house burns down. It's not the time to be complacent. So we're calling our huge network of thought leaders, seasoned investors, and technical experts to find out what they're seeing, thinking, and doing to mitigate risk and capture opportunity, and we're recording all of it. We're calling it our Coronavirus Crisis Investing Webinar, and it's totally free. All you need to do is register. Remember, mainstream media doesn't talk to real estate investors. They don't understand you because Wall Street pays them not to. That's why the real estate guys are here. To register for the Crisis Investing Webinar, simply send an email to crisis@realestateguysradio.com. That's crisis@realestateguysradio.com. Real-world wisdom is the best vaccine for a healthy financial future. Send your email to crisis@realestateguysradio.com.
Do you have a self-directed IRA invested in a syndication? Guess what? It's a ticking time bomb. Why? Because IRAs get hit with UBIT taxes, even Roth IRAs. Hi, I'm Damian Lupo, and we fix this problem for you forever. It gets even better because using the EQRP, you can literally get rid of taxes from all of your gains forever and protect your nest egg. The EQRP is the best vehicle to get it done. IRAs can't do it, not even Roth IRAs. You see, UBIT happens whenever any type of IRA invests in anything with debt. Don't worry, even if your IRA is already invested in a deal, we can kill that tax. Our team at Total Control Financial is here to give you control of your retirement money and free you from that deadly IRA tax forever. Want to learn more about the EQRP? Send an email to eqrp@realestateguysradio.com. I'll email you my special report and send you a copy of the QRP book. Paying a 37% UBIT tax is stupid. First step to getting rid of that tax is to send an email to eqrp@realestateguysradio.com today.
Hi, I'm Naomi Prinz, author of Collusion. You're listening to The Real Estate Guys.
Welcome back to the Real Estate Guys radio program, heard every weekend on this great radio station, all the time at realestateguysradio.com. And a lot of people are listening that way or through their favorite podcast outlets. We're talking today in our series of alternative investing for real estate. And, real estate is a wide category. Last week we talked oil and gas. It comes out of the ground. Next week we're going to talk about precious metals, also come out of the ground. This week we're really talking about real estate, but maybe a category you haven't fully looked into, and that is agriculture. Yield out of the ground being crops and produce and products instead of rents. And to help us with that, please welcome back to the Real Estate Guys radio program our good friend David Smith. Hey, David.
How are you, Robert? Nice to be with you again.
Good to have you with us. Wish we were in person like we have been at the Summit at Sea many times, but happy that we can use technology to get together. Folks who listen to our show are typically interested or already investing in real estate, and yet they don't often think of real estate as crops and farmland and agriculture, and yet that is arguably one of the longest and most proven uses of real estate. You've been in this area of real estate for some time. What are the high notes? Why do you think people are considering agriculture as an investment?
Well, Robert, there's several fundamentals with regarding to agricultural investments. Probably first and foremost is diversification of your investment portfolio. Many people are looking for alternative investments, agriculture, other types of alternatives. And also agriculture in general creates what we like to say generational wealth. So it's a long-term investment in many cases. There's variations within the agricultural field, but in general, you're looking at 10, 20, 25 years of actually producing wealth.
That's such a good point. Most tenants stay a year or two. If you're in retail or office space, you might have tenants that stay 5, maybe 10 years. But rarely do you have the same tenant, if you will, for 10, 15, 20 years. And with agriculture, many of the crops, the trees and the plants last for that long.
That's correct. Especially in the case of citrus, amongst others, you have a sort of a rollout time. You start with a small sapling, and then in 8 and 10 years, you've got a huge tree growing there that produces hundreds of pounds of fruit.
Right.
So
right.
You have that kind of option, and then you have other things, greenhouses, which are a little bit more fast tempoed. But in general, the investments are of a long period of time.
Okay, so that brings up a point, which is you think agriculture, I'm envisioning, farm fields with, corn or wheat or rice or trees where we've got lemons and oranges and those kinds of things. But a lot of commercial produce is created in an environment that it grows better, like a greenhouse. So just at this point, open up your mind that agriculture doesn't mean you have to see, rows out on a highway. There's lots of ways. There's hydroponics, aquaponics, all kinds of agriculture. But I think the bottom line is that it fills a basic human need. And there's lots of different crops and things. I mean, there's fruits, there's vegetables, there's long-term crops like lumber, the extreme end, right? People that invest in hardwoods. Those can take years and years and years with no yield. And then all of a sudden there's a big payout. Whereas something like oranges, the payouts typically, are they annually?
That's correct. They're annually.
Yeah, so the oranges pay out once a year, a crop. And then there are the greenhouses and those kinds of things that produce more than once per year. So part of understanding agriculture is getting your mind around choosing the market and the product correctly. Let's talk about markets. There are areas of the world that are just more prone to agriculture. You think about great wines, and therefore the grapes come from just a few regions on earth, right? Obviously, people think of France, maybe Chile, they think of the Napa Valley. There's certain areas, and it's like that for all crops. Some areas of the planet just aren't well suited for growth. So talk about how important it is to pick the right market.
Well, I think the market is certainly important, but it's just as important to pick the right country. And what I mean by that is, for example, Paraguay is unique in some ways because Paraguay only really does agriculture. And almost all of their produce is exported around the world. Very big in soybean, very big in cattle, amongst others. However, going back to the market itself, one unique aspect of what we do, our produce is focused on the internal market within Paraguay. So that gives us a certain level of stability. We're not competing against other companies in other countries in many ways. In some ways we are. We're competing against the imports that come into Paraguay. But it allows us to, number one, control our pricing to a great extent, which is very, very important. Thinking of profit for our company and profit for our investors, that's extremely important. But also it allows us to develop very, very good working relationships with all of the food distributors within the company or within the country. This is very important. So you have to look at what the investment is, where the investment is located, and what is the market of the investment. So this is very critical.
Well, let's talk about Paraguay. I had the great opportunity to get down there. You'd been inviting me for quite some time, and finally at the end of 2019, I got on a plane and flew first to Panama, where you live, and then we got on a plane and flew to Paraguay. And boy, it was mind-opening for me, an expanding trip, because it really is a country that has very little tourism. People don't go there like we would think. There's business travelers and so forth. And, you put us up at a nice hotel, but there aren't tons of hotels. Instead, this really is a working area of Latin America. Talk about why Paraguay makes sense, why it evolved as an agricultural and cattle capital, and why the conditions are right for growing.
Well, Paraguay, if you look at it on the globe, Paraguay falls south of the Andes. So if you look north to south, the land is very flat. In the northern flat areas of Paraguay, it's basically cattle country. Very flat, like a table, and you just see cattle. More than 15 million cattle are in the country of Paraguay, double the population of people. But then as you start to go further south and as you go toward Argentina, that area, then it becomes very rich. There's some roaming hills and things like that. But most importantly, there's a lot of water.
Yeah, that's critical, because without water, crops don't grow.
That's the key element. And that's why Paraguay is an agricultural country, because some reports say that Paraguay has more fresh water than any country in the world by way of aquifers and rivers. You see, most of their commerce is done by rivers. I think they have the second largest number of river traffic in the world. So they move all these grains and things like this all by river. So traditionally, Paraguay has always been an agricultural country since its inception, really. It has no beaches and no mountains, but it also has very, very small changes in the climate. You have about 6 weeks of winter, and that takes place between August and September, and it does not freeze. So it goes down to about 40 degrees, 6 weeks, 7 weeks, and then you're right back to warm weather. So all of this is very conducive to growing year-round. And that's really the history of why they've been such an agricultural country.
One of the things I learned when I was down there was about the surprisingly short winters is that still the winters are very necessary, because when the temperature gets down there in the 40s and even the lower 50s, that kind of stresses the trees a bit. And we learn that brings out the color in the fruit. So without those 6 weeks of winter, you're likely to have less colorful produce.
That's correct. That's correct. Most people think that the sun turns oranges orange, but actually the sun hits the oranges during the day, but it actually turns color in the nighttime under the cooler temperatures. So it's quite interesting in that respect. And also the land in Paraguay is very fertile. You can grow anything. We, of course, have specialists come in and they do soil samples on all of our plantations, which, by the way, is very interesting on another aspect. According to the results of the samples, that determines what kind of orange we grow in that area. So we use a variety of oranges, the Valencia, the Navel, which many people are familiar with. Other oranges are used strictly for juicing. So this allows us to not only maximize the land, But it also helps us with another very important aspect of agriculture, which also you need to think about, and that is pest controls. This allows us to basically control our pest control. What's the best way to do it here? What's the best way to do it there? There's not a huge variation, but there can be some. And of course, we use natural pest controls whenever possible. We use eucalyptus trees. We use the neem tree, as you might be familiar with. So all of this is very important in considering agriculture and investing in agriculture.
You know, it brings up a good point. For folks who have only invested in residential or commercial property, you're familiar with due diligence and, first market analysis, making sure the market makes sense, due diligence on the property. And you don't generally think about the soil unless you're developing. Then you might get a geological survey and you might look into, the veracity of the soil and those things. But in farmland, it's critical. You need to know the nutrients, the density, what's going to grow well there. And you can't just buy a farm anywhere based on its size or its location. All those things are important. You need size for scale and location for distribution. I think understanding that there's more to it than just, picking a advantageous looking property or a well-priced property. You got to understand this part of it. And what I love about what you guys do is you create a scenario under which we don't have to worry about that as investors, that we rely on you about that. We'll cover that more in a minute. But since we're talking about the oranges, I will tell you one of the things that you mentioned when we first started talking about what you do is that you got to understand in agriculture, the first few years, the trees don't produce fruit. So it's the kind of investment where you're going to put your investment in and you're not going to see any yield, literally, for 3 years, or in some crops it might be 5 or 6, and other crops maybe less. But with oranges, 3 years. And then they start to produce, and as the trees get bigger, they start to produce more, and there's kind of like a zone where they're producing the best. And then they get older, and they still produce, but maybe not as much. And eventually, it makes economic sense to chop them down, sell the firewood, and plant again. So this is just getting someone's mind around the way you invest. What I saw visually when we went down there was you took us out and you said, okay, these are about a year old. And there's no oranges, and you're looking at these little saplings, and they're green and healthy and beautiful. And then we go to another area of the plantation, and okay, these are 2 years old. Oh, okay, they're markedly bigger, still no fruit. All right, here's 3 years old, and you see the oranges are coming in. And then my favorite ones, the 4-year-old trees, beautiful, big bunches of oranges.
Yes, I mean, it's a long-term generational investment. It really is. And as you mentioned, once you reach year 3, where the tree is actually producing harvestable fruit, this goes on for 23 years.
Right.
It goes on for a long, long time. We could ask the question, well, what do you think is going to happen here in 23 years? This is a very viable question. And, we'd love to have a crystal ball. We don't.
Right.
But I can tell you that in general terms, at least in Paraguay, in most locations, farming will continue for many, many years. Okay, they will, because that's what they do. In other locations, perhaps where you went with the greenhouses, this location is very close to Asuncion, the capital city. And we do tell our investors that, it's quite possible 25 years from now, this could be prime residential land. Right. We really don't know, but what we do know is that the capital city is growing in that direction, because behind the capital of Paraguay is a river, and behind that is Argentina.
Yeah.
So you see, there's that also lends you to think, well, maybe I have some options down the road.
Well, that's a good point. Again, the idea that it's a longer term investment in general. If you're not going to see any yield for the first few years, then the yields get pretty interesting. We'll talk about that before we're done. And if this sounds interesting to you, David's got some great materials and information and performers and stuff that we can get your way. But the yields get pretty healthy pretty fast. And yet it's this timing thing, right? We tend to think about multifamily. You buy an apartment building that's already tenanted. Well, month 1, you have income. If I'm developing apartments from ground up, well, then I don't have income month 1. So it's more of that kind of a thought process. But I always like multiple exit strategies, and the fact that the land, because it's a big amount of land, also becomes potentially viable in the future is huge. Let's talk a little bit about the local market, because this is a unique situation. Your CEO, Karsten Fowl, amazing guy. We've spent time with him on the Investor Summit, at conferences, and certainly when we were down there in Paraguay. His background, German real estate guy, so love that. And his family came to Paraguay early, so they really have a feel for both the real estate side and now the agricultural side. And he was sharing with us the fact that you've got certain demands in the market that are unmet. Like originally, they were thinking, hey, we get this orange thing down, we're going to be able to export oranges, even to the U.S. Except that at maximum production right now, you still are importing oranges at Paraguay, and that creates kind of a competitive advantage.
Well, that's true, Robert. I think that in order to understand the citrus business in Paraguay, one has to realize that the largest citrus growing country in the world is Brazil.
Yeah.
In fact, Brazil owns all of the orange plantations in Florida. Many people don't know that, but they have over the years, they bought that. Traditionally in Paraguay, they're not a citrus growing country. They are row crops. They grow soybean, corn, wheat, chia, a variety of row crops, because that's traditionally what they do. And since the largest source of citrus is in Brazil, which is very near, they go, wow, what the heck? Instead of waiting on these trees, we're just going to import everything.
Yep.
Okay, there's a certain logic to that one can understand, which also becomes ingrained over decades of this kind of operation. Well, what Karsten did when he decided to expand his agricultural business, he started looking at markets inside the country that he could basically compete against. And he quickly realized there were two. One was citrus, and the other was greenhouse vegetables. Because historically, between 75 and 85% of all the products consumed in Paraguay are imported. So he says, okay, I'm going to go in this for the long run. And then by scale, I'm going to invite a certain percentage of investors to join me so that I can ramp this up in a way where I can take advantage of competing against the importers at a lower price. But not only that, being able to respond to client requests very quickly.
We saw this very up front and center when we were down there. You took us to a grocery store, kind of a high-end grocery store. We went to the produce department, and we saw these little green peppers that were, not the healthiest looking, but they're edible, certainly. And those were grown locally. And next door to those were these beautiful big orange and yellow and red peppers that were 3 times the size, looked a lot healthier. And you said, well, those are the imports.
Those came from Argentina. That's correct. They are greenhouse grown vegetables, and they're very succulent, as you say, very big and colorful, but they cost 3 to 4 times more than the local stuff, you say. And so now we are able to provide the same product to the local distributors at a lower price. And if they give us an order on Monday, we can deliver on Tuesday.
All right, good stuff. We're talking with David Smith about agriculture. What does all this have to do with you? Well, when we come back, we'll tell you how you can get involved as an individual investor in citrus and greenhouses in Paraguay. We'll also play real estate trivia next. You're tuned to the Real Estate Guys radio program. I'm your host, Robert Helms.
Live nationwide, you're listening to the Real Estate Guys. Find out more at realestateguysradio.com.
With everything going on in the world, don't let your lack of financial understanding derail your investments. Real estate investors need to see the bigger economic picture. The Federal Reserve, bonds and interest rates, precious metals, oil and gas, cryptocurrency, and the inner workings of monetary policy, just to start. If you're at all confused about how and why market metrics intersect and what it means to you as a real estate investor, take your understanding to a new level with the Future of Money and Wealth video collection. Discover the opportunity to hedge against inflation, deflation, and stagflation. Gain critical insights on real estate niches that perform well in challenging times, and learn specific strategies to fortify your balance sheet before before it's too late. Simply send an email to future@realestateguysradio.com for all the details. The Future of Money and Wealth includes 20 videos of powerful presentations and panel discussions featuring Robert Kiyosaki, Peter Schiff, G. Edward Griffin, Dr. Doug Duncan, Simon Black, CPA Tom Wheelwright, Brian London, Dr. Chris Martinson, and many more. Email future@realestateguysradio.com today.
Hey, this is Gene from the Residential Assisted Living Academy. Making money, cash flow is important. Doing it for the right reasons with a heart is even more important. If you'd like to learn more about turning a single-family home into a cash flow machine, earning $5,000, $10,000, $15,000 net or more per month, well, I'd like to share that with you. Our motto is do good and do well. There is a silver tsunami of seniors coming, and you have a huge opportunity. Take advantage of it.
To gain access to an informational webinar presented by certified financial planner and real estate entrepreneur Gene Garino and discover how you can turn a nice home in a nice neighborhood into a cash flow machine, send an email to ALF, A-L-F, at realestateguysradio.com. That's ALF at realestateguysradio.com.
Hey, it's Kyle Wilson, Jim Rohn's 18-year business partner, and you're listening to The Real Estate Guys.
Welcome back to the Real Estate Guys radio program. Thanks so much for tuning into the show. Hopefully you are spending more time filling your brain with great ideas. You can find out lots of great things to do and study at our website at realestateguysradio.com. We're talking today about investing in agriculture. And before we get back to our conversation with David Smith, let's play Real Estate Trivia, your chance to win a prize by knowing today's Real Estate Trivia question. Just a minute, I'll give you a question that has something to do with real estate, and in fact, the real estate we're talking about today. As soon as you think you know the answer, send your best guess to trivia at realestateguysradio.com. Include your name, the answer to the question, and your physical mailing address, because the first person that gets it right gets an awesome book called Desire, Discipline, and Determination, a collection of awesome stories put together by our good friend Kyle Wilson. That can be yours if you know today's real estate trivia question. Last week it was the first in our series on real assets outside traditional real estate, and we talked about oil and gas. Here was our question. The Beverly Hillbillies was a sitcom that aired on CBS from 1962 to 1971, and that's where the Clampett family moved to Beverly Hills after striking oil on their land. The show, however, was not originally to be set in Beverly Hills. It was going to be in a different real estate market. Which one? Well, the answer is the Beverly Hillbillies were going to New York City. Yeah, when they first conceived of the show, the idea of this family moving from the Appalachian backwoods to New York had all kinds of fun stuff. But let's face it, the New York Hillbillies doesn't have the same ring as the Beverly Hillbillies.
Well, they ended up actually flipping that around. I mean, they eventually came out with Green Acres, and they had the people from New York, Manhattan, moving out to be farmers in Wisconsin somewhere.
That's how television works. Just figure out one idea and turn it into something else, which is kind of what we're doing this week, looking at different asset classes, so to speak, and understanding them as real estate investors. Here's our real estate trivia question for this week. The country of Paraguay is one of only 2 landlocked South American countries, meaning every other country in South America has an ocean on one of its borders, but not Paraguay and not one other country. Which one? Which is the other landlocked South American country? If you know or just want to take a guess, send your best guess to trivia at realestateguysradio.com. Include your name, the answer to the question, and your mailing address. First to get it right will get Desire, Discipline, and Determination. That's today's real estate trivia question. We're talking with our friend David Smith, who showed me all around Paraguay, which was awesome. And we had a group of listeners come down as well. In fact, David, you'd invited us to come down and take a look. And we brought a film crew. And it was really a great time. And I said, let's offer it to the listeners, just get a small group down there. And we had, about a dozen people. And really, it was so interesting. I felt like intellectually I understood the investment. Made a lot of sense for a lot of different reasons, but then seeing it up close was great. So I know you guys, when travel comes back, you'll be doing the trips down there. And if you want to go down and kick the dirt, I certainly would recommend you do that. It is a long trip. It took me 6 days, which is part of the reason it took me so long to be able to find those days on my calendar. But I'm so glad I went. Now you have the benefit of seeing some of the video footage that we took, so you get a really good idea of it. But walk us through the way that the investment works. So you've got these plantations of oranges. We'll start with the oranges. And how it works is that an individual can own land but participate in the crops through your management.
Okay, well, our investments, both oranges and greenhouse, are basically structured the same way. There's two components. The first component is simply a real estate transaction, just like any other.
Yep.
You know, you have a purchase contract, you buy so much land. The land is then dismembered from the main master plan of the plantation, and it is a new title created in your name or any legal entity that you prefer to use. So that's the first component. The second one, and probably the most important one at the end of the day, is the farm service agreement. The farm service agreement is an agreement between the investor and the farming company to operate the plantation, to care for your land and your crops,
Yep.
to harvest the produce, take it to market, and sell it for a profit, not only for the investor, but for the company. And then it's a completely passive investment, hands off. We don't require further investment after that. The only exception to that is that in the case of the greenhouses, there is a refurbishing renovation amount that has to be paid after 10 years, which is quite normal. And we explain all of that. We also have that set aside for the ROI payment, things like that. But essentially, these are a hard asset, passive turnkey investments.
Well, that's one of the things I like about it, that you need to do your due diligence and understand the market and the timelines and all of that and what the variables might be. But then it really is set it and forget it. You know, you're not having to go down there and harvest oranges when the time comes or replant in the greenhouse. And yet you have a team that does that. And I'll tell you, I was so impressed meeting a lot of the team members. Now, because Paraguay is not a tourist destination, most of the folks down there don't speak English. We got around very well. And of course, because you're bilingual, you saved the day in many ways. But it was great to just see the hard work they put in, the pride that they put in. And then when it came to the greenhouses, just the technology blew me away. So let's talk about greenhouses for a little bit. You might have in your mind, it's a little, 20 by 30 room. These are huge. How big are the greenhouses, David?
The greenhouse itself is 0.6 of an acre.
Wow.
Yeah, and the land is double that amount. So essentially, you have 0.6 of an acre in a plantable area inside the greenhouse. The greenhouse is just a shade bigger, but we don't count that. We count the actual plantable area, which is 0.6 of an acre. And then the other part, the land is used, of course, for harvesting trucks and people, service and maintenance and things like that. So that's why we've doubled the land amount, and then the greenhouse is half that size.
And let's talk about what you're growing in those greenhouses.
Well, we are growing fundamentally vegetables that are used almost in every meal in Paraguay. And these are cucumbers, tomatoes, variety of each. We have various types of those. And most importantly, we do red, yellow, and green peppers. And those are very, very common in all meals that they use in the local market. So, yeah, it's a really good business for us.
Now, folks decide they want to see the video, and it's a pretty short video. We filmed for many days and then ended up with 5 or 6 minutes, but it gives you a real good flavor and feel of it. We were there on a day when the first greenhouse had just been planted, and the little saplings were tiny, or whatever you call those plants. They're 2 inches tall. How big are those plants now?
Well, when we were there, we were actually there in December.
Yep.
Now they're about 15 feet tall.
Wow.
They're essentially a wall, and we do limit the height due to the harvest operations, but they grow, about 15 feet tall, and we have several different harvests per year, depending on which one. The tomatoes, you can actually harvest those plants several times over the year. Cucumbers you have to change once or twice, the same with the peppers, but it goes 24 hours. Basically, the technology of the greenhouses allows you to operate it on a smartphone.
Wow.
Essentially, the irrigation system, the fertigation system is all set up. It's all computerized. So based upon the information from the sensors inside the greenhouse and on the roof, we have sensors on the roof as well. This tells our pumping system how many times we need to plant this individual plant, or if we need to open up certain sections of the materials of the greenhouse to allow for airflow. So we have these temperature sensors, wind sensors, all of this stuff is all connected to the computer system.
It's pretty amazing to see. I mean, the technology is something. I had no idea how much goes into one of these. But the other part of it is, most greenhouses are designed to keep heat in because you're growing something that needs a stronger and a warmer climate than you have. And you're actually the opposite. When we were there in December, it was 100 and a lot. And a lot of the greenhouse movement there is really designed to cool the crops down, and you have these big fans in there, and you're trying to keep the temperature consistent.
That's correct. And these greenhouses are designed in Israel, and the materials for the coverings they come from Israel. But what's really interesting about it is within the structure of the greenhouse, you have different openings that are covered. You have a ceiling inside that can be automatically rolled back by motors. And then certain areas of the greenhouse, when there's wind detected at a certain time of the day or night, it automatically will either raise the barrier or it will lower the barrier to keep it cool. So yes, you're right. The struggle in Paraguay, and this is why the locally grown vegetables are not very attractive, because it's just too darn hot.
Yep. Makes a ton of sense. So to sum it up in terms of the offerings that you guys have, the oranges are a once-a-year crop. And so essentially you're going to buy a parcel of land, and that starts under $20,000, by the way. So we love that. You can be a internationally diversified agricultural farmer investor for under $20,000. And that's just a once-a-year payout once the oranges start growing. With the greenhouses, though, there are these varied payouts based on how much the crop turns over. So tomatoes more often than peppers and so on. So that, again, depends on what's planted, and all that's based on demand. So talk about what's happened, if you will. I think this is fascinating. One of the questions people have had, and we've been talking about in the last few weeks, is what does COVID-19 mean to my investment? For residential investors, people are facing tenants not paying, the lack of ability to evict, perhaps forbearance agreements with lenders. We know that what happens in a pandemic with vegetables is they grow, but talk about what's happened on the ground locally in terms of demand for the product.
This has been quite unique, Robert. I think we discussed this in some detail a few days ago, but in the case of agriculture, in Paraguay, agriculture is exempt from lockdown, number one.
It's essential.
It's essential. Now, it has presented us with several challenges. We've had to implement a rather stringent sanitation protocol in our plantations and for our employees. We had to bring in some specialists to explain this to them so that they understood how critical it was to practice good methods and understand that the system's going to change a little bit, but most importantly, the harvest just keeps going.
Yeah.
So there's no slowdown there as far as we're concerned, luckily. However, the demand has really taken us a bit by surprise, to say the least. As I mentioned earlier on, we compete against the import market. It's about 85% of the consumption. And of course, our goal is to gather as much of that market share as we possibly can. However, over the last month, due to the varying conditions of the coronavirus, with ports being shut down, customs being shut down, all of these things have started happening. Well, basically, the imports have just dropped to a trickle. So I was just speaking with Carson a couple of days ago, and he said, David, we have people calling us every day, asking us, do you have anything that you can ship us? So we're now shipping all of our oranges that we just harvested last month. We've shipped all of those. We have another harvest. You normally harvest an orange tree 2 times a year. We have another one in November. It is already pre-sold. That's all. We have the orders. It's pre-sold. And then as far as the vegetables, We ship them out. Right now, we're shipping them out every 2 or 3 days. And what this has done for us as a company, it has accelerated our relationships with the food distributors, because now they really do realize that they have a source within the country that grows a comparable product to what they're used to paying much more money for and waiting longer to get within 36 hours delivery.
You know, I think that brings up a point that maybe is obvious, but I just want to make sure we don't leave it unsaid. The fact that you can deliver now the same quality that was previously imported, but don't have all the logistics and border crossing and all the costs that come with moving the produce as far, does give a competitive advantage. So that's a win for the grocers. It's a win for the consumers. It's a win for you guys. And you folks are literally growing your business. It's when we were there in December, I think there were, 7 or 8 greenhouses in various stages of construction. And the plan was to have something like 50. And we just got looking at how long that might take to sell. The other side of what's happened with COVID-19 is talk about investor demand.
Well, that's probably the biggest surprise, Robert. About 6 weeks ago, I began receiving a lot of emails and more than a few phone calls from people that I'd had, communication with over the last 6 months, maybe 9 months or a year. They've always liked what we do. They always said, yeah, this is really great what you're doing. But, for various reasons, they were into other things. And suddenly I get these phone calls and say, hey, David, I think I'm ready to do this. Do you guys still have any availability? And I said, sure. I said, we have it. And ultimately what's happened in the last 6 weeks, Robert, is we've sold 12 greenhouses.
That is something. That just tells you a little point on the market, right? Perspective. And here's why. This series we're doing is all about real assets, hard assets, investing in something other than paper assets. And there's a place for that in certain portfolios. But, a lot of folks have been hit pretty hard in the stock market, and even the volatility of that is scary. There are certainly, things that happen that create some volatility in agriculture, but for the most part, especially the more you have, that kind of evens out over time. So we think it's a great opportunity for people to consider. It's a way to diversify internationally by product type and by who your consumer is. So if you'd like more information, David has 2 reports. One is all about citrus and oranges, great pictures. It's really put together well. There's also performance in there so you can understand what an investment of $18,500, and that's a smaller size parcel, or double that size for less than double the price. So you get a little better buy if you buy more. You can look at what those returns are, and I think that'll be interesting to you. And then there's a separate report about the greenhouses, and you'll see, again, some pictures and so forth. We'll also give you a link to the video. Now, I'll tell you, the video is something that we flew down and did as a promotional piece, so it really is designed to sell the product, whereas we're really here to educate people. But if you're interested in learning more, all you have to do is send an email to grow@realestateguysradio.com. grow@realestateguysradio.com. Hey, David, we sure appreciate your time and expertise today, and stay safe where you are in Panama, and we'll look forward to seeing you at a upcoming event once we can all travel again.
Thank you, Robert. It's always a pleasure. Be safe as well.
There's David Smith from Paraguay Ag Invest. More when we come back. You're tuned to the Real Estate Guys radio program. I'm your host, Robert Helms.
Real estate investment advice right in your mailbox. Sign up for the free Real Estate Guys newsletter at realestateguysradio.com.
In uncertain times like this, it's great to know there are 2 things you can always count on: high demand for affordable single-family homes to live in, and Terry Kerr's amazing Memphis team at Mid-South Home Buyers to find, fix, and manage the next addition to your recession-resistant real estate portfolio. The Memphis market is logistics and distribution dynamo with an economic engine that's essential to moving goods and critical supplies all over the United States. Quality rehab, proven profitable property management, affordable rents, and solid ROI make turnkey property investing through Terry's team a dream when it matters most. To learn more about Memphis and Mid-South Home Buyers, send an email to midsouth@realestateguysradio.com. That's midsouth@realestateguysradio.com. Hungry for more real estate investing ideas? Here's 2 steps you can take today. First, go to realestateguysradio.com and sign up for our weekly newsletter. You'll get access to a continuous feed of thought-provoking commentary specifically for real estate investors, while also focusing on broader picture economics. Then, once you're at our site, look for the Resources tab, where you'll find our amazing collection of special reports. Browse dozens of white papers, webinars, and market reports, and request the ones that appeal to you. What are you waiting for? Head to realestateguysradio.com to implement education for effective action.
Hi, this is Peter Schiff, and you are listening to The Real Estate Guys.
And welcome back to the Real Estate Guys radio show. Thanks so much for tuning into the show. Tell a friend about the Real Estate Guys, and be sure you sign up for our Crisis webinar. We're collecting some of the smartest folks we know, and they're sharing their ideas on how you can proceed in your investment career and portfolio in light of what's been happening in these last weeks and months. All you have to do to get a free invite is send an email to crisis@realestateguysradio.com. We're talking today about agriculture, and we certainly learned a lot about oranges and greenhouses today.
I also think we learned a little bit something about life. You had mentioned it, Robert, and maybe you learned it while you were down there, but you talked about how the stress brings out the color of the fruit.
Yeah.
And it just made me think, because like right now, a lot of people are very stressed out. Obviously, you know, in our business career, there's been ups and downs. 2008 was probably the lowest down, very stressful. And yet in a lot of ways, it made us better, made us smarter investors, made us better business people. It caused us to purge out a lot of the activities and things that we were doing that were kind of on the edge, on the margin, that weren't core, got us more focused. It was really good in a lot of ways. And I think that as people are listening to this and we're getting ready to do this crisis investing webinar, you know, you have to confront the brutal facts. You have to look at what's going on in the world and just assess its strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. It's easy to fixate on the threats and the weaknesses, but there's a lot of strengths that we have and more that are going to be developed going through this, and there's going to be a lot of opportunities. So I thought that was really great. Nature has so many lessons to teach us just about living life and being successful. And stress
You know, it's so
brings out the
interesting you
color
bring
of the
that up
fruit.
because there's so many businesses today that have furloughed employees and closed operations or certainly limited what they've been doing. And many are finding that they're trimming the fat. There were some areas where they probably could have been putting a better eye to the business, except everything was going well. So it is in trying times when you figure out what the world's about and more importantly, what you're about. We love real assets because they do well in good times and they do well in bad times. We're seeing that with oil and gold. We're seeing that with agriculture. We're seeing it with real estate in general, even though we certainly have residential investors that are feeling the sting of unemployment through the rent collections. It's not anywhere near as bad as other areas of the economy. And most residential investors don't have all their eggs in one tenant basket. So being an investor is more than just picking a niche and getting rich in it. It's really knowing what the whole playing field is like. And that's why I appreciate David Smith sharing with some of the nuances today with us about agriculture. It was great to get down there and see what they're doing. I had some exposure to farmland, and of course we've been to conferences and things and talked to folks about it, but to spend a few days with the folks who make it happen was extraordinary. So if you're interested in learning more about what they do at Paraguay Ag Invest, you'll get the report on oranges and on greenhouses, and you'll get the videos to really see what we're talking about if you'll just send an email to grow@realestateguysradio.com. grow@realestateguysradio.com. Speaking of grow, one of the assets that has performed extremely well in the last several months, especially against all world currencies other than the dollar, and pretty well against the dollar, the precious metals. Next week, we'll talk gold and silver with our good friend Dana Samuelson. Until then, go out and make some equity happen.
This episode of the Real Estate Guys radio show is brought to you by Paradigm Life. Powerful cash management strategies using life insurance. Learn more at beyourbank.com. Mid-South Home Buyers. Low-cost, turnkey cash flow properties in Memphis, Tennessee. Corporate Direct. Asset protection strategies for real estate investors from attorney and rich dad advisor Garrett Sutton.
Find these and other great companies under the Resources tab at realestateguysradio.com. To learn how you can expose your product or service to the Real Estate Guys audience, call 888-489-7723 extension 4. That's 888-489-7723 extension 4. Or use the feedback page at realestateguysradio.com. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week right here on the Real Estate Guys Radio Show.